Have you ever poured your entire soul into building something, only to watch the ones you built it for try to tear it down? Not with malice, but with a well-intentioned blindness that is somehow even more painful. Hello, I'm John from Texas, United States, your friend and narrator of real stories. Stay with me until the end of this incredible story. Want to see your story told here? Then get in touch with us. This is not a story about strangers or enemies. It is a story about family, about the deep, complicated chasm that can open between a parent's dignity and a child's love. This is the story of Margaret. At 76, Margaret was the undisputed matriarch of the Miller family. Her home, a sprawling two-story house she had shared with her late husband, David, for nearly 50 years, was more than just wood and plaster. It was a living museum of their love story. Every scuff on the hardwood floor was a memory of their children learning to walk. The garden in the back was a testament to her husband's love for roses, and the kitchen was the heart of it all, the source of decades of holiday feasts. The house was the family's Bible, a sacred text written in the language of shared memories, and Margaret was its devoted keeper. But the keeper was growing frail. A sharp, unforgiving arthritis had settled into her knees, making the stairs a formidable mountain to be climbed each night. Her health was declining, a fact she acknowledged with a quiet, stubborn refusal to surrender. Her 3 adult children, however, saw it with a growing sense of panic. They loved their mother dearly, but their love was now intertwined with a deep-seated fear for her safety. They saw the risks, the potential for a catastrophic fall, the isolation of living alone in such a large house. Their solution, born from this loving fear, was logical, practical, and utterly devastating to Margaret. They called a family meeting on a Sunday afternoon. Margaret, assuming it was a usual get-together, had prepared a lemon cake, but when she saw the brochures and spreadsheets laid out on her polished dining room table, a cold dread began to creep into her heart. Her children, with the confident efficiency of a corporate board, presented their plan. They had researched the finest retirement homes in the area, places they called senior living communities. They had charts comparing costs, lists of amenities, and a detailed financial plan that involved selling the family home. They spoke of safety, of convenience, of her having a worry-free life. They spoke of everything except what truly mattered. They didn't speak of the memories soaked into the wallpaper. They didn't speak of her husband's roses. They didn't speak of the fact that this house was the only place on earth she still felt his presence. "It's a beautiful retirement home, Mom," her eldest son, Mark, said, pointing to a glossy picture of smiling seniors playing cards. "You'd have so many friends. You wouldn't be lonely." Lonely, the word struck her like a slap. She wasn't lonely in this house. She was with her memories. She was with David. The only time she felt lonely was when her own children looked at her and saw not a person, but a problem to be managed. This is a heartbreaking and common dilemma. The children believe they are acting out of love and ensuring safety, while the parent feels their dignity and history are being erased. Who do you feel is more in the right at this moment? Is there a right answer? Share your perspective in the comments. "And your health would be our top priority," her daughter, Susan, added. No more worrying about falls. They had thought of everything except her. They had engineered a solution for the problem of her old age without ever consulting her about the life she actually wanted to live. This wasn't a discussion. It was a verdict. She was simply being informed of the terms of her own obsolescence. The respect she had commanded as the family matriarch had vanished, replaced by a patronizing concern. "My answer is no," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "This house is not for sale. This is our home." A frustrated sigh escaped from her youngest son, a sound that wounded Margaret more than any angry word could have. "Mom, be reasonable," he said. "We're doing this because we love you. We're worried sick about you here, all by yourself." Their love felt like a weapon, a tool used to justify this profound act of disrespect. They couldn't understand that they were asking her to sell not just a property, but the very heart of their family. They were asking her to trade a lifetime of sacred memories for the sterile convenience of a one-bedroom apartment in a facility full of strangers. The meeting ended in a cold, painful stalemate. When the front door closed behind them, the silence they left was heavier than any she had ever felt. She sank into her husband's old armchair, the scent of her lemon cake now a mocking reminder of the happy family she thought she had. She looked around the room, at the photographs on the mantelpiece, at the very air thick with 50 years of their love story, and she felt a righteous anger begin to burn away her shock. This was her legacy. This was their legacy. How dare they try to put a price on it? How dare they try to tidy it away into a neat, manageable retirement home? That night, she knelt by her bed, her arthritic knees screaming in protest, and she prayed. But her prayer was not one of meek supplication. It was a prayer of fury and defiance. "God," she whispered to the darkness, "you gave me this family. You blessed me with this home. Am I wrong to fight for it? Is it a sin to refuse to be erased?" She felt as though her own children were casting her out, not just from her home, but from her role, from her very identity. Where was the commandment to honor thy father and thy mother in their spreadsheets and brochures? Had the love and respect she had nurtured in them for decades evaporated so completely in the face of their modern, practical fears? She thought of Jesus and his righteous anger in the temple, overturning the tables of the money changers who had desecrated a holy place. And she felt a kinship with that anger. For her, this house was a holy place, a temple of family memory, and her children were trying to turn it into a real estate transaction. She fell asleep with a tear-stained face and a warrior's heart. She would not surrender. She would not be packed away like a dusty heirloom. This was her home, her life, her story, and she would not let its final chapter be written by her children in the cold, impersonal ink of a sales contract. A silent war had been declared, and she, Margaret Miller, would not be the first to fall. The weeks that followed were cold and quiet. The Sunday family. Dinners stopped. The phone calls from her children became brief, clinical check-ins, their voices laced with a polite but firm disappointment. They no longer asked about her day. They asked about her health. "Did you take your blood pressure, Mom? Are you remembering all your pills? Please don't use the step stool in the kitchen." This dynamic is so painful, where love gets replaced by management. Have you ever been in a family situation where communication became all about logistics and health, losing its emotional connection? How did you handle it? Every question was a subtle reminder of their position, that she was a liability, a fragile object that needed to be managed. They would casually mention the retirement homes they had seen, describing the facilities as if they were luxury resorts. "The one on Maple Street has an indoor pool, Mom. You'd love that." They didn't understand that she would rather drown in her own memories than swim in their sterile, chlorinated pool of forced cheerfulness. Margaret knew that a war of attrition would not work. Her anger, no matter how righteous, would only make her look like a stubborn old woman, confirming their narrative that she was no longer capable of making rational decisions. She needed a new strategy, one that came not from a place of anger, but from a place of unshakable love and wisdom. One morning, As she sat in her husband's armchair reading her Bible, her eyes fell upon a verse in Deuteronomy. "Only be careful and watch yourselves closely, so that you do not forget the things your eyes have seen, or let them fade from your heart as long as you live. Teach them to your children and to their children after them. Do not forget. Teach them to your children." In that moment, an idea, a divine strategy bloomed in her mind. She would not fight their logic with her emotion. She would fight their cold, hard facts. With the undeniable truth of their own history, she would make them remember. Margaret's idea to fight their logic with the emotional truth of their own history is brilliant. Have you ever used old photos or stories to help a family member remember what's truly important? Share your story in the comments. Her new project began that very afternoon. She found a beautiful, old, leather-bound scrapbook, one she had always meant to use. This would not be just a photo album. This would be the definitive story of their family, the testament of her house. She called it the Book of Our Home. She decided to go room by room, dedicating each section to the memories and the lessons that space had held. She began with the kitchen. She wrote about learning her mother's secret recipe for apple pie at the very same wooden counter her children now wanted to see dismantled. She wrote about the time a young Mark had tried to help her bake and ended up covering the entire room and himself in a cloud of flour. She paired the memory with a verse about Jesus breaking bread with his disciples, about how food is more than sustenance, it is fellowship and love. Then she called Mark. "Mark, dear," she began, her voice warm and free of conflict. "I was just thinking about something today and had to ask. Do you remember what you said after we finally got you cleaned up from that flour explosion when you were 5? Mark was silent for a moment, caught off guard. I think I said it was the best day ever," he finally admitted, a faint chuckle in his voice. "That's right," Margaret said softly. "The best day ever. I'm just writing that story down. It's important to remember." She hung up, leaving him in a thoughtful silence. Next, she tackled the living room. She wrote about the Christmas mornings, the sea of wrapping paper, the joy on their faces. She wrote about the night her husband, David, had set up the old projector to show home movies, the flickering images dancing on the very wall her children now saw only as a structural feature. She called Susan. "Susie, I found the little silver bell from your first Christmas ornament. I'm looking at it right now. It still has that tiny dent in it from when you threw it at your brother." Susan's laughter was immediate, a genuine, unguarded sound. "I can't believe you still have that." "Of course I do," Margaret said. "Some things are too precious to let go of." Her strategy was subtle but relentless. She was forcing them to walk through the rooms of their own hearts. With each call, she was rebuilding the house in their minds, not as a real estate asset or a health liability, but as the sacred ground of their childhood. The final room in her first phase of the project was the small bedroom upstairs, the nursery where each of them had spent their first years. She wrote about the nights she had spent in the rocking chair, a chair that now sat in a corner of her own bedroom. She wrote about the quiet prayers she had whispered over each of them as they slept, prayers to God for their health, their happiness, and their future. This entry was the most personal, the most deeply rooted in her faith and her love as a mother. She didn't call her youngest son about this one. Instead, she waited for Susan to visit the following weekend. When Susan arrived, her demeanor was still that of a manager checking on a project. "Hi, Mom. How are the knees? Are you eating properly?" Margaret smiled patiently. "My knees are the same, and I ate a lovely lunch. But come, I want to show you something." She led Susan upstairs to the old nursery. She had placed the open book on the small bed. "I'm writing our story," she said simply. and I wanted to read you this part." Her voice was steady as she read about the hopes and dreams she had for her baby girl, about the overwhelming love that had filled that very room. She read the verse she had written beside the entry from the book of Samuel. "For this child I prayed, and the Lord hath given me my petition which I asked of him." When she finished, she looked up at her daughter. Susan's face was pale, her usual confident composure completely gone. She looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time. She ran her hand along the edge of the old crib that was still stored in the corner. "You rocked me to sleep in this room," Susan said, her voice barely a whisper. "Every night," Margaret confirmed, "and I thanked Jesus for you every single one of those nights." For a long moment, they stood in silence. Margaret could see a battle raging behind her daughter's eyes, the battle between the practical, responsible adult and the child who was standing in the heart of her own history. The spreadsheet and the retirement home brochure felt very far away. Susan finally looked at her mother, her eyes filled with a new, dawning understanding. I need to think about this, Mom," she said, her voice thick with an emotion Margaret hadn't heard in years. After Susan left, Margaret felt a quiet sense of hope. She had planted a seed. She didn't know if it would grow, but she had tilled the soil of her daughter's heart with the powerful tool of memory. That night, her son Mark called. "Mom, Susan just called me. She told me about the book you're writing." His voice was different, hesitant, the usual corporate efficiency replaced by something more thoughtful. She said maybe we're not seeing the whole picture here." Margaret held her breath, her hand tightening on the receiver. This was it, the turning point she had prayed for. "What picture aren't we seeing, Mark?" she asked, her voice quiet, not wanting to spook the fragile understanding that was beginning to emerge. Mark sighed on the other end of the line, a sound not of frustration this time, but of weariness and dawning clarity. "The one you've been trying to show us, Mom. That the house isn't just a house, that your health isn't just a series of risks to be managed. We got so focused on the what if that we forgot about the what is." He paused. "We need to talk again, all of us. But this time, we need to listen." The second family meeting was held a week later at the same dining room table, but the atmosphere was transformed. The glossy brochures for retirement homes were gone. In their place was Margaret's Book of Our Home, lying open in the center of the table like a sacred text. Her children didn't sit opposite her like a panel of inquisitors. They sat around the table with her, as a family. This apology from the children is so powerful. What do you think is the hardest thing for an adult child to say to their aging parent? And what is the most important thing for that parent to hear? Share your thoughts below. It was Susan who spoke first, her eyes red-rimmed, her voice thick with emotion. "Mom," she began, "we owe you a profound apology. I've been thinking all week about that nursery, about the feeling of being in that room, and I realized we were so terrified of losing you that we were treating you like you were already gone." She looked at her brothers, who nodded in agreement. "We were trying to pack up your life, to put your memories in a safe, manageable box, so that it would be less painful for us when you weren't here anymore. It was selfish. It was a terrible failure of love and a profound act of disrespect. And I am so sorry." Mark cleared his throat, his usual business-like demeanor gone, replaced by a raw vulnerability. "She's right, Mom. We saw your health declining, and we went into problem-solving mode. That's what we do in our jobs. But you're not a project to be managed. You're our mother. We stopped honoring you. We saw your connection to this house as a stubborn obstacle, not as the very heart of our family's love story. We were wrong." They all looked at her, their faces open and full of a renewed respect. Margaret felt tears welling in her own eyes. But these were not the tears of anger or loneliness she had shed before. They were tears of gratitude. Her prayers had been answered. God had not given her a miracle cure for her arthritis, but He had performed a much greater miracle. He had healed her family. "I love you," she said, her voice full of a love so immense it filled the entire room. "I know you were acting out of love, but love without respect can feel like a cage. My health is a challenge, I know that, but my spirit is strong, and my spirit lives here in this house with the memory of your father and the story of all of us." The conversation that followed was the most honest one they had had in years. They talked about her fears and theirs. They talked about her desire for dignity and their need for her to be safe. And together, they created a new plan, a plan built not on spreadsheets, but on love and compromise. It's wonderful when a family comes together to find a creative solution that honors everyone. Have you ever been part of a family project that brought everyone closer together? Tell us about that experience. The retirement home was never mentioned again. Instead, they decided to bring the support to Margaret. They agreed to hire a lovely woman from their church to come for a few hours each day, not to be a warden, but to help with the heavy lifting, the laundry, the things that were becoming difficult for Margaret's health. Mark, the financial planner, researched and invested in a state-of-the-art chairlift for the stairs, making the second floor accessible and safe for her again. Susan, a designer, spent a weekend with her mother rearranging the kitchen to make it more ergonomic and installing beautiful, sturdy grab bars in the bathroom that looked like elegant fixtures rather than clinical aids. They reinstated the Sunday dinners, and this time the whole family cooked together in the kitchen, filling the home with laughter and the aroma of shared effort. They didn't just visit. They participated. They helped in the garden. They fixed the leaky faucet. They sat with her and listened to her stories, asking her to add more to the book of our home. Margaret had won more than just the right to stay in her house. She had reclaimed her position as the heart of her family. She had taught her children their most important lesson, that honoring your parents is not about making them safe, but about helping them live a life of purpose and dignity on their own terms. She had shown them that a family's legacy isn't something you sell, it's something you actively cherish and preserve. Her faith was renewed, stronger than ever. She saw God's hand in all of it, the wisdom He had given her to fight with love, the way He had softened her children's hearts. She knew that the love story she and David had started was not over. It was simply evolving, its lessons being passed down to the next generation. Months later, on a bright Sunday afternoon, the house was alive. The sound of her grandchildren's laughter echoed from the backyard where they were playing. The smell of roasting chicken filled the air. Margaret stood in her kitchen, not watching from the sidelines, but in the center of it all, showing her granddaughter how to crimp the edges of a pie crust, the same way her own mother had shown her at that very counter. Her arthritis still ached, but her heart was full. She looked out the window at her family, her beautiful, imperfect, loving family, all gathered in the home that love had built and that love had saved. Her legacy was not in the bricks and mortar, but in them. And it was safe. The story of Margaret is a powerful lesson for every family. It teaches us that the final chapters of our parents' lives are not ours to write. They are theirs. Our role is not to direct, but to support. Not to manage, but to honor. It is a reminder that the greatest love we can show is to listen, to respect the wisdom of a life fully lived, and to understand that a home is more than a place. It is the sacred archive of a family's soul. If this story of family, love, and respect has moved you, please honor it with a like so it can find its way to others who may be facing this same struggle. And please subscribe to Stories Beyond 50 for more stories that celebrate the wisdom and dignity of a life well lived. Now, it is your turn to share. This space is for our community's wisdom. Have you ever faced a difficult decision within your family regarding the care of an elderly parent? How do you balance the need for safety with the need for dignity and respect? What does the word home truly mean to you? Your story could be a great comfort to someone in the midst of this challenge. And if you are not ready to share, but you believe that respecting our elders is one of the most important forms of love, just write the single word respect in the comments below. Let us affirm together the value of our elders. We read and cherish every comment. Thank you for your heart and your wisdom. God bless you, and we will see you in the next story.